Welcome, I'm Ryan. This is MTG Friends, and let's do another Commander deck tech. This time we're doing a very spicy one out of Kaldheim. It is Esika, God of the Tree. That is one of those modal / flip cards that on the other side is the Prismatic Bridge. Two things worth mentioning with this kind of a commander. One, we can utilize the colors on either side of this card. So we have green on one side, which is Esika, and the Prismatic Bridge has all of the colors of the color wheel. We're going to go ahead and lever that in this build and utilize all the colors of the color wheel. The second thing worth mentioning is that when it's in our command zone, we can play either or onto the battlefield. But keep in mind, if it gets whack-a-mole on the battlefield and ends up back in your command zone, you're still going to pay that commander tax of 2 each additional time, regardless of which one you put onto the battlefield next. So for example, if you have a Esika out, it gets blasted back into your command zone, and then you decide to play the Prismatic Bridge the next time, you are still paying that 2 colorless commander tax, even though technically the Prismatic Bridge hasn't been out on the battlefield yet. Clear as mud? Clear as mud. All right, as in all of the Commander deck techs, let's go ahead and talk about the different packages of this 99 cards we got. Before we jump into that, if you are new, please hit subscribe, please hit the like button, and hit those alerts. Moving on. All right, first up, we have the draw package. We have Shenanigans, which in this type of deck, we aren't running too many shenanigans. We got the land package, control, removal, as well as the god package, since we're doing god tribal for the most part. Couple protection pieces. We have a nice little combo piece that's near and dear my heart. Love this combo. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then of course we have a serious amount of ramp. This ramp is mostly in the form of either reduction or mana rocks, those kinds of things. We're not running a ton of mana dorks, albeit we are running birds of paradise. We're going mostly towards having those indestructible gods that we're going to be able to lever and put onto the battlefield or tease out with our commander card. All right, now let's jump right into the commander. The first part of the commander is Esika, God of the Tree. It's in green, colorless green, 1/4 legendary creature god. It's got vigilance with tap to add any color of mana. It also allows your other legendary creatures to tap for any color of mana as well. And then the flip side is the Prismatic Bridge. This is a great legendary enchantment that allows us on our upkeep to go from the top of our library down until we hit either a planeswalker or a creature and put it onto the battlefield free of charge. Now just keep in mind that is not casting the creature, so if you're planning on doing some kind of Eldrazi shenanigans that requires a casting cost, that is not what this card does. It puts it onto the battlefield. Just keep that in mind if you end up wanting to swap certain cards in and out. It does not cast the card. All rice-a-roni, here we go. And it looks like we're going to talk about lands first, and we're going to blast through this fairly quickly. And in all of our deck techs, it's worth mentioning that you can easily swap out some of these cards because we're running fetch lands, we're running shock lands, original dual lands, and some utility. You can easily swap for budgetary reasons some of those cards, any of those cards, for dual lands that come in tapped, or actually basic lands. No problem whatsoever. This is just tooled to be super efficient with a very effective mana base. Alright, so let's blast right through this. We got Ancient Tomb, which taps for 2 colors, gives you 2 damage. We got some fetch lands in here, some original dual lands, more shock lands, fetching, shock. We are running Cavern of Souls because we are doing a lot of god cards, and this allows us to play a god card without it getting countered if Cavern of Souls is in there. City of Brass is purely in there for mana fixing. Command Tower, awesome for mana fixing. Exotic Orchard allows us to play a color of a mana source your opponent has. More fetch lands. We're running 1 forest. You can easily swap that out for whatever you want. More shock lands. Mana Confluence is another great mana fixing. Costs you 1 life each time you do it. More fetch. Fetch. And some shock land action. Fetch land. Etc. etc. As you see, things you wouldn't be surprised to see. We got a Savannah. Some fetch. Scrub lands. And again, you can swap these cards out if you don't have them. You can put in other lesser dual lands. And this one is very much in line with this deck. It is the World Tree. It is brand new out of Kaldheim as of this recording. The World Tree enters the battlefield tapped, add green. As long as you control 6 or more lands, you control have add 1 more of any color. Great mana fixing. And then it has this ultimate here, which is for every color of the color wheel times 2, sacrifice the World Tree, search your library for any number of God cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Wow, folks. That means we can basically dump the entire library of gods onto the playfield if we so choose. That's pretty awesome. The only thing that could actually wreck that happening is if somebody immediately had a mass exiling spell that would remove everything via exile. Don't want that. So just be careful. Read the board. Read the board. Thespian Stage, a very good utility card. Thespian Stage becomes a copy of target land, except it has this ability. So it is just a very useful utility card. Tropical Island. Yes, I know. If you don't have one, don't play it. Just play something else. Tundra as well. Verdant Catacombs. Volcanic Island. Watery Grave. Windswept Heath. And just a few more fetches. Let us now dive into the gods package. Now, most of these gods are going to be indestructible and going to have the devotion aspect of it. Like this one. As long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, Athreos isn't a creature. So Athreos Shroud-Veiled, so 4 colors, white, black, 4/7. At the beginning of your end step, put a coin counter on another target creature. Whenever a creature with a coin counter on it dies or is put into exile, return that card to the battlefield under your control. So you can start putting coin counters on different creatures that your opponents control. And then if you do a mass removal, all of those come back to the battlefield under your control. Me likey a lot. Next up is Yafara, God of Polis. It is 2 white, blue, 6/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to white and blue is less than 7, Yafara isn't a creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you had another creature enter the battlefield under your control, last turn, draw a card. So a nice little draw mechanic, plus it's an indestructible god. Erebus, God of the Dead. It's a 4-drop that is also indestructible, has the devotion aspect of it, and it has your opponents can't gain life. And it's got an additional nice little part where you can pay 2 life, and draw a card. So nice little draw mechanic as well as being a god. More gods! God Eternal Ronas. It's a 3 green 5/5 Death Toucher. This is one that actually doesn't have devotion, so let's talk about this card. This is out of War of the Spark. I really like this card. When God Eternal Ronas enters the battlefield, double the power of each other creature you control until end of turn. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. When God Eternal Ronas dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library 3rd from the top. So that gives you a choice whether to put it 3rd from the top. You probably will be putting it 3rd from the top most of the time. Alright, next up is Heliod, God of the Sun. It's a 4-drop in white, 5/6 indestructible with the devotion mechanic. Other creatures you control have vigilance, and for 4, you can put a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. Just a solid god card. We're including this because it is solid. Iroas, God of Victory, or is it Iroas? I don't know. There's an ass in there somewhere. Oh, that was so dumb. Okay, 2 colors, red, white, legendary enchantment creature god. It's a 7/4 indestructible with devotion again. Creatures you control have menace. Ooh, I like it. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. boy, it gets spicier and spicier the more gods you can get on the playfield that are synergizing with each other. It's a nasty, nasty thing going on. Really, the only thing that makes things reset for us once we start getting the board presence are mass removal spells. Karamitra, God of Harvests. It's a 3 colors, green, white, 6/7, indestructible with the mechanic of devotion again. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Now keep in mind, this is a forest or plains card, so this could be a dual land that has plains or forest in the name. So that is those shock lands, dual lands, etc., etc. Kuranos, God of Storms. It is 3 colorless, blue-red god, 6/5 indestructible with the devotion again. Reveal the first card you draw on each of your turns. Whenever you reveal a land card this way, draw a card. Whenever you reveal a non-land card this way, Kuranos deals 3 damage to target creature or player. It's all upshot on that card. There's no downside to that card. Klothys, God of Destiny. This is a really fun one out of Theros Beyond Death. This is actually still in Standard as of this recording, and it's a very good sideboarding card for different decks in the meta. But that's really not what we're talking about. We're talking about gods. So it's a 4/5 with devotion. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a land card, add green or red. Otherwise, you gain 2 life, and Klothys deals 2 damage to each opponent. Now, if there is a god that you would rather see in here other than this one, by all means swap it in. I just actually really like this, and it's got good utility to it. Krufix, God of Horizons. It is a 4/7 legendary enchantment creature god. Also with the devotion, you have no maximum hand size. If unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. I mean, yeah, we'll take it. What a great god. Me loveth the god. Whoops, just went ahead a little too far. Mogus, God of Slaughter. What just a nasty sounding card. And it's only for 4, which is great. It's a 7/5 indestructible with its devotion. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Mogus deals 2 damage to that player unless he or she sacrifices a creature. We like this because it's at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. So this does not affect you, which is just fantissimo. Mwah! Very nice. Very nice. Is that a good Italian accent? Oh, or do I just sound mildly racist? I think it's good. Maybe not. Maybe it sucks. I don't know. Put it in the comments. Does my Italian accent suck? Well, I don't have one, so I digress. All right. Nylea, Keen-Eyed, 4-drop, 5/6, indestructible god. Also with devotion. It's for 3, you can reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. We like this because it lets us start sifting through our deck, especially if we don't have the Prismatic Bridge out doing all the heavy loading for us. All right, Farika, God of Affliction. I love that this is a 3-drop. And for 2, we can exile target creature card from a graveyard. Its owner puts a 1/1 black and green snake enchantment creature token with that touch onto the battlefield. So a great utility god. You don't have to use the exile mechanic, but if you have somebody playing a lot of graveyard play, this one is going to be super janky fun for you. So it's a pretty versatile god, and it's only a 3-drop. Phoenix, God of Deception. It is a 5-drop 4/7 with the devotion mechanic. Creatures you control have tapped. Target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is this creature's toughness. So this can really mill the helter-skelter of one of your opponents real quick, especially if you have a decent board presence and you can start tapping your creatures and milling 5, 6, 7 cards at a time. I like it. I like it a lot. Alright, yeah, of course you're going to see this card in a god build. Perfus, Bronze-Blooded, 5-drop, 7/6 with the devotion mechanic. Other creatures you control have haste. And for 3, you may put a red creature card or an artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So we mainly have this in here for giving our creatures haste, our gods, and also it's got a pretty big body, a 7/6, and then the sacrificing mechanic, I mean, that's the downside to this, because you got to end up sacking whatever you put out there. So you may or may not be using that depending on if you're trying to get something past the finish line with one of your opponents. Now, this one is brand new out of Kaldheim. This is a super janky card that also happens to be a god, which is incredible. It is a legendary god, Tergrid, God of Fright. It's a 5-drop 4/5. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So anytime somebody sacks something or discards something, you get to snake that and put it right on the battlefield under your control. That is absolutely incredible. It does have a modal flip side part to this, but this is the part of the card that really synergizes incredibly well with this god deck. Next up is Thassa, Deep Dwelling for 4/6/5 with the Devotion. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to one other target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. And for 4, you can tap another target creature. So we can start flicking one of our gods that has when enters the battlefield mechanics, which is just super janky fun, and that's why we're including Thassa. We love gods in this god build. Talk about Thassa, let's do Thassa, God of the Sea as well. It's a 3-drop 5/5. That is incredible stats, just that alone. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. So now we can start scrying and synergizing with the Prismatic Bridge if we have it. Oh, just double thumbs, man. Double thumbs. And for 2, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So then we can also make unblockable. I mean, this thing has all sorts of cool stuff going on. The Locust God, one of my absolute favorite gods that's got some serious jank to it. It is a flyer. When you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. And for 4, you can draw a card, then discard a card. When the Locust God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So it's got some insane sticking power that is just really hard to get rid of for your opponent. And it's a god. Yes, gods. Gods everywhere. The Scarab God for 5. It's a 5/5 legendary creature god. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. Well, we're not doing a zombie build, so that part isn't all that important. And for 4, exile a target creature card from a graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie, which starts to synergize with itself. When the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Another very sticky god. Love those things. Alright, Valki, God of Lies. This is another new one out of Kaldheim. It's got when Valki enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. And then for X, and not even tap an X, but for X, you can choose a creature card exiled with Valki with converted mana cost X. Valki becomes a copy of that card. So can you imagine if you grab something that's super janky and then turn this into it? Let's say it even had like poison counter actions going on. I mean, that's just super funny. And then on the flip side, it has Tibalt, which is a planeswalker. And this thing isn't really why we have it in the deck, but having that versatility is super cool. So having Tibalt on there as well as a planeswalker that can also exile cards that you can then play. Just a fantastic modal flip card at your disposal. Next up is yet another god. Xanagos, God of Revels. In red-green, it's a 6/5 with Devotion. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. So as you can see, all of these gods have very powerful mechanics that tend to be somewhat spendy in the 5-6 realm of mana costs, but we have some 3s and some 4s, so it's not like we're having to wait those extra turns to start teasing things out. Plus we have our commander card with Prismatic Bridge that can start teasing things out, as well as if we have the flip side of that out where we can start using these gods and legendary creatures to start tapping for additional mana. So this all synergizes very, very well. So that is the god package. I love that. You of course can swap out a couple of different gods in place of some of these if you have certain ones that you really, really like to play. Next up is protection. Teferi's protection, the creme de la creme of protection. It phases out all of your permanents until your untapped step, and you can't lose the game, you can't lose life, etc., etc., etc. Nothing changes, just the ultimate in terms of protection. Veil of Summer is very nice and can be utilized in a pinch because it only costs 1 green. It's an instant as well, which makes this so powerful, especially for an uncommon. Draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control can't be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and from black until end of turn. Very spicy card, very awesome card. Moving on. Now we're just running a few control pieces. Counterspell is one of them. Deflecting Swat is another. In case you're not super familiar with this one, it is a very high valued card when you're running red. If you control a commander, you may cast this without paying its mana cost, which is just a bonus. You may choose new targets for target spell or ability. So this could actually be used to counter a counter spell or to just redirect something else. It's a very good utility control piece. Fierce Guardianship. If you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. I really like this ilk of card where if you have a commander card out, you can spend nothing to actually cast the spell. Counter target non-creature spell. And then Opposition Agent. When this came out in Commander Legends, my jaw dropped and I just thought, wow, as close to an auto include in black as you can get in terms of commander. I would never say auto include, but this is a serious consideration for any black decks that you're running. It's a human rogue 3/2 with flash that allows you to take control of when an opponent is tutoring for a card. You take control of their turn and you tutor yourself. You pick the card and or cards depending on what spell they cast, and then you exile those cards for you to be able to cast at a later time during the game, regardless of whether Opposition Agent is still on the battlefield or not. So it's worth repeating very briefly. You get to take over control of them tutoring their deck, snake a card of your choice, exile it, and then play it at your leisure whenever you want. Wow. And when I say whenever you want, if it's a sorcery spell, then you play it at sorcery speed, instant, etc., etc., etc. You know what I mean. You know what I mean, Vern, right? Now we will talk about draw. And the creme de la creme, Demonic Tutor, is a 2-drop that allows you to put a card into your hand from your library. Doesn't get much better than that. Eladamri's Call. Now, this one lets you go fetch for a creature and put it into your hand. I love it. I love it. It's very useful. Enlightened Tutor. This one puts an enchantment or an artifact at the top of your library. Be careful if you have the Prismatic Bridge in play, because then you wouldn't necessarily want to play Enlightened Tutor at that point. So it'll just take a little finesse when you play Enlightened Tutor and of course Mystical Tutor, because Mystical Tutor will fetch up a sorcery or an instant and put it on the top of your library as well. Now, Noxious Revival, this is put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Again, if you're running this in conjunction with the Prismatic Bridge, you could go grab something out of your library that's a creature, put it at the top, one that you know you want at the top, and then it'll end up being the first card that you hit with the Prismatic Bridge, those kinds of things. And of course, the flip side of that is Noxious Revival can be used to get rid of something in a graveyard of your opponents that might be causing you problems and putting it on top of their library. Rhystic Study. This one is, of course, a nice draw mechanic. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. It makes them have to think every time they play a spell, do I have the 1 to deal with this, or are they going to draw a card? It does add up. It is an obnoxious card, yes, I know, but hey, put that obnoxious card in your deck. Sylvan Library, super jank draw mechanic. You probably all know what this is. It allows you to draw and pay 4 life per card. Moving on. Vampiric Tutor. Again, this one goes and grabs a card out of our library, puts it on top. So this one is utilized very well, especially if you're grabbing a creature with the Prismatic Bridge. Again. Alright, now we are into the removal section. And Abrupt Decay is just a very good staple. It is, this spell can't be countered. Destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. And then Anguished Unmaking. This one exiles a non-land permanent and you lose 3 life. Assassin's Trophy, also a very good staple that costs you Golgari colors, and it lets you remove or should I say, destroy any permanent, which includes lands, and then they get a basic land for their troubles. Child of Alara, this is in here because of this kind of build and because we're running Indestructible Gods. When Child of Alara is put into a graveyard from play, destroy all non-land permanents. They cannot be regenerated. So all non-land permanents includes all of your opponent's mana rocks, any of your mana rocks, any of your non-gods, all of that kind of stuff. So just be careful when you decide to play this. It's a very, very powerful card. Cyclonic Rift, yes, I know. If you don't like running Cyclonic Rift, just swap it out for something else. It's very useful, very handy, especially in a pinch, especially in the kind of play groups that I tend to play in. Cyclonic Rift is just a great staple. It's a 2-drop that has return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner hand, and of course you can overload it for 7, which does all non-land permanents your opponents control, which is just janky jankerson, super powerful. Until this thing gets banned from Commander, I'm going to be running it in a lot of my blue deck spells. Then we have some mass removal. We got Damnation, the Wrath of God in black. Deadly Rollick, Deadly Rollick, which exiles target creature, and then it doesn't cost you anything if you have a commander in play. Doomscar is brand new out of Kaldheim. I like this so much that I'm adding it into this deck. It is a Wrath of God, but ends up costing you 3. What this is it has Foretell, so you can spend 2 out of your hand and put it into exile face down, and then on a later turn you can play it for its Foretell cost at sorcery speed, of course, and then you have a Wrath of God for 3. And then of course you can just play it outright for the 3 colorless white if you need to. So just a very cool new addition to our arsenal of 99 cards. Alright, we do have Oko. Yes, I hear the boos. I can hear them. But you know what? If we can get Oko out early or have Prismatic Bridge dump this onto the playfield for us, it's just a fantastic removal spell, turning things into Elk. It's got a great ultimate, etc., etc. Yes, we're going to run Oko, Thief of Crowns. Alright, we got a few more removals. Urza's Ruinous Blast. It's a 5-drop which exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. Most of the stuff we have is legendary status, so this is going to help us more than it's going to hinder us, and certainly give us a reset button if we need it. Wrath of God. Yes, we're going to run Wrath of God. Alright, we're into a couple of the shenanigan pieces. Court of Ambition. It's a 4-drop enchantment. When Court of Ambition enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the monarch, instead, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. And if you remember from earlier in the episode, remember that one god card I said was super janky about discard? Oh yes, that one right there. These two really combo up swimmingly. Yes, indeed. All right, Court of Ambition right out of Commander Legends. I really like this card, and I kind of wanted to shoehorn this thing into this deck, but after I put it together, I realized it's not even shoehorning it because it does have synergies and really is something that your opponents have to deal with every turn until they get rid of it, if they can. Helm of the Host is a true Shenanigans card. It lets us have any of our legendary gods end up having token duplicates of it, so we can just start really going crazy with this. The downside of Helm of the Host is that it costs 4 to get onto the battlefield and then an additional whopping 5 to equip. That's why it's not super practical all the time, but boy, will this really start changing the feel of the battlefield if you get this out and it sticks. It is a nasty, nasty card, and I like it. All right, now we have our little combo piece. It is for infinite damage. It is Heliod Suncrown with Walking Ballista. The way you set this up is you end up with both of them on the play field with 2 spare mana, 1 colorless and 1 white, which is off of Heliod Suncrown. You spend that 2 mana once they're both on the play field. Another target creature gains lifelink until end of turn, which ends up being the Walking Ballista. Now you go infinite damage because when you remove a +1/+1 counter, it does 1 damage to target, and then because of that, having lifelink, you now give it +1/+1, makes it an infinite loop. You wipe the board and you scoop and you go to the next game for your opponents. Lovely, lovely little combo. Me likey, me likey. All right, now a little bit of ramp. This one fits perfectly into all the devotion stuff we got going on. Altar of the Pantheon, it's for 3. Your devotion to each color and each combination of colors is increased by 1, which is very significant with all of our gods running around causing shenanigan and craziness as we play and move through the game. And then you can also tap it to add 1 mana of any color. If you control a god, demigod, or a legendary enchantment, you gain 1 life. Now there's a real good chance you're going to keep gaining 1 life every time you tap this thing. Then we have some standards. We got Arcane Signet. We got Birds of Paradise for any color. Chromatic Lantern for any color. All your lands get tap, add 1 color of any to the mana pool, or you can tap it itself and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Dockside Extortionist, oh, just a super, super swimmingly janky, awesome card in red. When Dockside Extortion enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. There's a very good chance you're going to be getting some tokens out of this that you can then utilize to Rampalicious. This is a spendy card, so you could certainly swap it out for just another standard mana rock of your choosing. Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Technically a mana dork, sort of, but not really, because you can't tap it for anything, but you can play an additional land, and lands you control are every basic land type, in addition to their other types. So just fabulous land fixing, mana fixing. Farseek, so we can go pull a plains, island, or swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Yes. Golos Tireless Pilgrim. So if we're having issues with mana and the mana colors, we can drop it for 5 colorless and go grab the mana we need. When Golos Tireless Pilgrim enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So that's the main reason we have this thing in there. And then if you start ending up being able to do its, what I'm going to call its ultimate, which is 2 colorless, all the colors of the color wheel, exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn without paying their mana costs. You are well on your way to winning that game. Hullbreacher, just insanely awesome card, also out of Commander Legends, with a similar type theme as Agent, where it's got flash. It's a 3/2. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one, they draw in each of their draw steps. Instead, you create a treasure token. So you start shutting down all of that draw mechanics that opponents tend to have by just dropping Hullbreacher onto the battlefield, unbeknownst to them, and then suddenly also being able to ramp up because you're creating treasure tokens. Good. Delicioso. That reminds me of Dora the Explorer. Dora the Explorer. Hey, if you've made it this far, put a comment in about Dora the Explorer. It makes me know that there are still people out there watching what I do. I appreciate it. I do. I really do. Mana Crypt. Costs you nothing to have a soul ring that taps for 3 damage if you lose a flip of the coin. By all means, put this in here. It is such a great card. It has spiked up in price, so swap it out for like a Signet or something if you don't have it and you want to swap it for something. Sky Shroud Claim for 4. Search your library for up to 2 forest cards, and notice it's forest cards, so you can go grab shock lands with this or original dual lands that have the forest in it. Smothering Tithe is another janky, awesome card. It's a 4-drop. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with sack it, add 1 mana of any color. So another way to just keep ramping so that we can start dropping gods on their heads and just going godalicious on their keisters. Keisters? Yeah, I was trying not to say ass, but I said it anyways. Alright, Urza's Incubator. It's a 3-drop. As Urza's Incubator enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. That would be gods. Creature spells of that chosen type cost 2 less to cast. 2 colorless less. So, yeah. Most tribals, you're going to want to run the Incubator. Not all tribal, but this one definitely makes sense. And folks, that brings us full circle back to the top. So the main thing we're trying to do here is get that commander out, Esika, either early or ramp up so that we can get the flip side out there, the bridge, and then just go to town. Start putting things on the battlefield for free. That's got gods. It's got all sorts of craziness going on. Super fun, super tribalistic. I love the synergies of this deck. Tell me what you think. Any cards that you think should go in there? Any swaps that you would do? It's not the end-all be-all, but I definitely think you're going to have a lot of fun with this deck. Let me know how it goes for you out there on the battlefields. Thanks for tuning in. Check out our other episodes. Check you later.